Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Extra Point Podcast on November 21st, 2014. I am Andrew Goldberg and I am joined by Adam Levin, Zachary Benau, and Michael Green joins us for the first time. All of us cover respective divisions for Fox Sports as digital content programmers. I do the AFC East, Adam does the NFC North, Michael does the NFC South, and Zach does the AFC South. You can tweet at us at AGBird12 for me, at Blue Collar God for Adam, and at Zachary Benau, B as in boy, E-N-A-U for Zachary Benau. Boys, how is everyone doing today on this Friday? It's the weekend, so naturally you have to quote that song that I just blanked on, and let's have some fun.
The Friday song.
Yeah. Freaking weekend, baby. We're about to have me some fun from Ignition. From R. Kelly. There you go.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's a good start, right? So, anyway, last night, Thursday Night Football, we actually had the first game, probably the best game of the season on Thursday Night Football, where the Oakland Raiders got their first win by beating the Kansas City Chiefs. Oakland jumped out to a 14-point lead. Latavius Murray came out of nowhere with 111 yards on 2 carries to give him a 2-touchdown lead. Then the Chiefs came all the way back to tie at 17-17, actually took the lead 20-17, and then Derek Carr had a little moment bringing the Raiders all the way down the field, scores of 1:42 left on a 9-yard touchdown pass to James Jones. Raiders go up 24-20. Chiefs are driving. They're about at their own 48, I think it was. And then the Raiders almost, just blew it completely. Fourth and I think it was 3, and Alex Smith goes back to pass. Incomplete pass. It looks like the Raiders will get the ball and turn over on downs, be able to kneel it, and the game, feel the victory. Everyone's happy. And then they didn't get 1, not 2, but 3 penalties on 1 play. 2 holding penalties and 1 hands to the face on one of the defensive linemen, which gave the Chiefs first down. Then, on 3rd down, after an incomplete pass, the Chiefs go back to pass. Moore, linebacker of the Raiders, sacks Alex Smith and then sprints 20 yards downfield, celebrating with Khalil Mack. They're jumping around. They're doing some type of handshake. And then they don't realize that the play is still going on behind them, and the Chiefs are about to snap the ball. Justin Tuck calls a timeout in one of the craziest sequences you'll ever see. And Justin Tuck is about to tear into Moore and Khalil Mack for celebrating for no reason on a sack 20 yards down the field when the play is still going on and the Chiefs are about to hike the ball. Luckily, the Chiefs throw away the ball on 4th down, and the Raiders win the game. Guys, I'm going to throw it to Zachary first because he's from San Francisco, now in LA. I mean, when you saw this game and you were thinking of all the Raiders fans that you know, what in the world were you thinking, and what were some of, I guess, your friends thinking when they were just watching that game? I mean, I as a Raiders fan, I just would have said that is so Raiders because they would have blown the game, and it would have been the worst way to blow the game.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I wake up every day just grateful my dad made me a 49er fan because I just would not be able to handle that. In my mind, when I saw those 2 idiots celebrating, not only did they make the sack and not celebrate like right in front of the quarterback, they made a point to run, like you said, 20 yards away from the line of scrimmage. So they couldn't even have a chance to get back to celebrate. So in my mind, I'm just sitting there laughing hysterically like, this is so Raiders. I've seen this a million times. I can't imagine what my friends are thinking. And I know somebody sitting there in the black hole last night, sitting in the rain all day. I was like, this guy's going to kill himself. Because, I don't know, they haven't won in a year, a whole year. And then you got idiots celebrating like they just won the Super Bowl on 3rd down. It was mind-boggling, but at the same time, just seeing so many Raiders games, talking to so many Raiders fans in my life, it's like, well, that's why they're the Raiders, and they won despite their best efforts to try to lose. And, that's the Raiders in a nutshell, and I just can't picture the Raiders ever being good. And glad I'm not a Raider fan, but I got a kick out of that last night, I must admit. I was laughing, having a great time watching that.
Yeah, Justin Tuck really saved them from one of the maybe the most boneheaded potential loss that there could have been. And that's what a two-time champion will do for you. He'll call timeouts when two young guys who haven't won anything in their life are celebrating, like you said, Zach, they won the Super Bowl. I'm born and raised in LA. I've been to the Bay Area plenty of times. Don't even really need to go to the Bay Area to meet Raiders supporters. Anyone who knows the West Coast knows that there's a lot of them left here in LA. The team used to be here. There's a certain element in LA that still loves the Raiders. We get a lot of Raiders games as well as Chargers games on CBS when there's not a big national game that they want to show LA. So, with that context, maybe not as well as Zach, who's a former Bay Area guy, but pretty well here in Southern California, that I'm sure tons of Raiders fans were going nuts thinking they were going to lose the game on that play. And, they've got to feel good about themselves for getting their first win in a calendar year. They had gone a whole calendar year without winning a game. They're finally the last team in the league to get their first win. No one's winless anymore. It's a divisional win, which is a pretty big deal because they can at least say, hey, we might have potentially ruined Kansas City's chances at anything, which is, saying something. And good for them. Good for them. Even though, as we've all alluded to, that could have been, over on what would certainly have been the dumbest plays of all, the dumbest ways to a game ended of all time.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders wouldn't be the Raiders without a few boneheaded penalties in a game. I think fans accept that. I'm also from the Bay Area, and I've grown up around it as well. I think one of the big stories that they have to be excited about is Latavius Murray. Before getting a concussion, he looked like he was going to run for 400 yards. He looks like he'll be the starter from here on out, and I think fantasy football players will probably be rushing to their waiver wire to grab him. Also, just, Kansas City has to be hurting after this loss. You have to wonder how they're going to rebound. So look out for that in the coming weeks because they're still in a division race.
Right. And my California boys, Andrew, you'd probably roll your eyes at this, but we finally got rain here in our fair state. We've been begging for it, and we finally got a little bit of rain. Maybe the hillsides won't be so brown.
Yeah, but wasn't that only in Northern California? Wasn't it the fear in Southern California that you needed it?
Well, it's kind of all over the state, but we got rain down here. It moved down the coast. Like last night, it rained here in LA.
Yeah, and that game last night was just so weird because it was at one point it looked like I was watching a high definition game on standard definition. That's how much rain there was last night, and I mean it was nuts. And when you look at this game, the Chiefs had a history of losing to really bad teams. In 1975, they lost to an 0-11 San Diego team. 1984, they lost to an 0-10 Houston Oilers team. 2000, they lost to an 0-11 San Diego team again. And then last night, they lost to the 0-10 Raiders, breaking the 16-game losing streak that, Adam, you had mentioned. And, I mean, the Raiders are like, part of me actually wanted them to go 0-16. I know that's like very bad to say, just, a lot of Raiders fans, they're actually probably one of the best fans in all of the NFL. But, like, that team, I don't know how they do it. They all, like, honestly, they should have almost beaten the New England Patriots. And on the flip side for the Chiefs, like, how do you blow that game? You're in the thick of the NFC West race, and actually you were one game behind the Broncos with a game left to play them. They don't have the tiebreaker because they lost to them earlier in the season. But at the very least, you're in the driver's seat for a playoff spot. Now you lose to a team that you should have wiped the floor with. And here you are losing to the Raiders. And now your playoff chances kind of take a big hit, especially with so many good teams in the AFC. The Dolphins are in the chase. The Chargers are in the chase in their own division. I mean, that was a really bad loss for them. And one last note, their wide receivers, I don't know if it's Alex Smith or their actual wideouts, but they dropped a lot of balls, and they have not caught a touchdown this season yet. Through 11 games, they've not caught a touchdown.
I think Kansas City's biggest problem last night, and it showed, was their down the field big play offense. They don't really have that, and you see, like, when you get Alex Smith into long situations, he can be a 3-and-out machine. And obviously divisional rivals expose those weaknesses better than anyone else because they're the only teams you play twice. So they really, really know you. And the Raiders knew if they got Alex Smith into long situations, he'd be a 3-and-out machine. The Chiefs do have that penchant of losing to bad teams historically, because the Chiefs historically they're an above average team, but they're not elite. So sometimes they will, as you showed with that history, lose to some bad teams. I think they lost because the Raiders were motivated to win. They really wanted to win, and they knew how to beat KC. But going forward, KC really needs to be concerned about the fact that they can't complete passes down the field the way they'd like to, and they've got to shore that up. They have to face Denver. That's a team that can throw it downfield. They're going to have to stay in the game with them. And besides just a tough AFC race, these AFC West teams, between having to play the NFC West out of conference, between having to play the improved AFC East as their intra-conference divisional matchup, these AFC West teams have been facing a tough schedule. I mean, the Raiders might have one of the hardest schedules for a last-place team. So the Chiefs didn't have a lot of liberties and a lot of gimmies. They've been doing well against their good competition, but that was a gimme in a schedule that's pretty tough for them even down the stretch, and I can't believe they lost it either.
Yeah, I mean, you got to win the games you're supposed to win, especially if you're going trying to get into the playoffs, potentially trying to even win the division to tie the Broncos. So that's a tough one. I just have a hard time trusting any team that can't throw the ball. I mean, listen, as I mentioned earlier, growing up in San Francisco, being a Niner fan, I was subjected to many of Alex Smith. And, yeah, he's a winner. Yeah, he's a game manager. But he can't throw the ball downfield. And that's really what the NFL is turning into now, is you got to be able to throw the ball. And the Chiefs have problems doing it. So I don't think their defense is quite good enough. And, with this loss, I'm not sure they get into the playoffs. If they do, I think it's a first-round exit again. You just can't have someone who can't throw the ball and then get advanced to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree with Zach. I don't think the Chiefs are going to win too many vertical games. It starts and ends with Jamal Charles. If they can't rely on him and they need to start throwing the ball downfield, I just don't see them competing, and I don't see them going toe-to-toe in an aerial attack with a team like the Broncos. If they have any hopes of winning out, they're going to have to play good defense, keep a low-scoring game, and run the ball as much as possible.
Yeah, the weird thing is that, both of you guys, we saw that Alex Smith hasn't thrown a touchdown to a wide receiver. They do have weapons at tight end with Anthony Fasano and Travis Kelce. But the thing is, last year, they scored 40 points and they didn't score 40 points, but they scored over 30 points and lost the game to the Colts, where they had a huge lead. It's just ridiculous because, Alex Smith has shown the ability that when they kind of take the handcuffs off him, he can win some games and actually put up a lot of points. But he is still labeled as a game manager. It will be interesting to see this team going forward. They really only lost Dexter McCluster and Jeff Schwartz on the offensive line. Not too huge of losses there. But let's go to the Bills and Jets, guys, because this is an incredible story because the Buffalo area got slammed by this whole lake effect snow, which piled 5 feet of snow on one half of the part of Buffalo. The north part didn't get much snow. The southern part got slammed. And unfortunately, Ralph Wilson Stadium, where the Bills play, was in the southern part of Buffalo and got slammed. Totally unplayable. No one can travel on the roads. They have the National Guard there going 20 miles per hour on the roads, delivering food and stuff. You had Mario Williams in like a small, how do I describe this? Like one of those big machines that they drive on. This is going to I sound like an idiot already. Big machines they drive. It's like smaller than a tractor, though, and it kind of has a claw at the bottom where it comes up.
Snowplow?
No, not snowplow. See, all right, I'm just gonna quit. Anyway, he's driving that around, bringing his neighbors like food supplies. Anyway, they canceled the game, postponed it for Sunday. A lot of questions about where they would play. Some thought they could go to the Carrier Dome. Some thought that maybe they'd go back to MetLife Stadium where they played the Jets before. Some thought maybe going to Pittsburgh or even Cleveland. But ultimately, they're going to Ford Field in Detroit. And this game will be on Monday Night Football at 7 o'clock, I think. And then the Baltimore Ravens and the New Orleans Saints will play at 8:30, which we'll get to a little bit later in our kind of divisional preview when we wrap around here, and throw it to Michael for the NFC South. But the Bills haven't been able to practice. The Jets have. I mean, what did you guys think of this game? I mean, this also might not be the only game that gets moved from Buffalo because they play the Browns next week. And I don't know if they're going to be able to clear all the snow from Ralph Wilson Stadium because they also got like another foot or two last night. I mean, this has just been a crazy like set of circumstances that the Bills have gone through. And I don't know if they're going to be ready to play these games. They essentially just lost 2 home games, and they're going to play 2 road games in back-to-back weeks. Meanwhile, having to deal with all their families back at home with 20 feet of snow on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge disadvantage. First of all, I mean, I can't even imagine what's going on. Like I said at the beginning last week, I've never even been in snow. So seeing those pictures of, like, Fred Jackson throw his kids and the kids, like, sinking into the snow and 6 feet tall, it's, like, mind-boggling to me. I'm like, whoa, I can't even imagine. It's literally 70 degrees outside right now. I got, like, my air conditioning on in my house.
Poor you.
So, I don't know. I mean, but they're not practicing. Like you said, they have their families. And then they're going to play this game in Detroit, which I'm obviously not the head of the NFL or the weather committee or where people can go. But to me, the location kind of makes no sense. I get it, they play inside, but somewhere in New York, I feel would be more fair, even if they play it at MetLife. The fact that they're going to Detroit I don't know who's going to be at that game. Like, what are the numbers looking like? Are people have to still pay to get full-price tickets? Do people from Detroit? Like, is there any Buffalo fans of Detroit? How is that all working? Does anybody know that?
Well, here's the thing before Adam and Michael jump in is that so let's say, okay, Zach, you're on the West Coast, you're in LA. I guess bad example because they don't have an NFL team, but let's just say, like, you had an NFL team, okay, they're going to play at the Coliseum. And instead of seeing, like, whoever moved to LA and, like, the Broncos, you're going to see the Chiefs and the Rams because it somehow got displaced because of, God forbid, a tornado. Would you, as a fan, want to go to that game just because it's an NFL game and the ticket prices are probably going to be pretty low?
Maybe. But, I mean, it's a good point. Depends on the teams. Personally, if this exact same scenario happened and they moved the Jets and Bills to LA, I would say no. Because it's not a marquee game, and it's not something I'd be super interested in. It actually wouldn't be the worst idea to move the game to LA and put it in a place where they don't have NFL fans and let them go see a game. You could probably get a big crowd. But me personally, no, I'm not paying to see Jets and Bills for 2 teams I don't care about because as much as the discounted prices, it's still going to be $12 beers, $8 hot dogs. Like, it's the whole thing. So if it's not my team, it's not a marquee game like that. But I do see what you're saying, but I just think it's going to be a real small crowd in Detroit. And the Bills are going to be, I mean, they're obviously at a huge disadvantage losing a home game already. And then, obviously, who knows how much they practice this week, if any, and having, to deal with this, natural disaster on their hands.
Here's a question that pops into my mind, though. What if the Bills come out and they play really well? Does that become a call for less practices? Do they have a legitimate reason to maybe say, hey, coach, we won this game. How about, cutting some of the practice out?
Maybe it does something to the CBA because now you would say, like, okay, it's late in the season. you should start restricting some of the practice hours that we take, and we can still play with less hours. And that could be huge with the whole CTE, concussion syndrome and player safety, taking less hits. It could actually extend some players' lives and their playing careers. Sorry, obviously their lives, but their playing careers as well. That's a pretty good question. What do you think about this, Adam?
Yeah, that is a good question, Mike. Maybe it can change those attitudes. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff about this. Number one, Ford Field has had this precedent before. In 2010, the Vikings I'm sorry, not 2010. In 2011, I believe, the Vikings and Bears, there was a game where the snow collapsed the Metrodome roof, so the Vikings couldn't play there, so they had to go to Ford Field to play, and they gave discounted or free tickets to Bears and Vikings fans to come to Detroit. Now, obviously, the Minneapolis-St. Paul area and the Detroit area, much closer, the Chicago and Minneapolis-St. Paul area, much closer to Detroit geographically than Orchard Park, New York is to Detroit geographically. So I agree with Zach's point. You should have put it in New York State, RL Carriers Dome in Syracuse, somewhere else within the state, because that's just unfair. I mean, that's, easily a couple almost 500, 600 miles to the west of Orchard Park. That's not that fair. I don't think fans are going to go out there. I don't think Detroiters are going to care enough to go out there no matter how much you lower the price. Or maybe they do because it's just football. Leave it to the NFL, by the way, to make this a ESPN Monday night doubleheader. A game that otherwise would get no national attention. Hey, let's keep pushing the league. Hey, Bills, Jets, we'll find some way to make this interesting. And then, followed up by a Ravens Saints, which it's like we said we'll get to later. But I don't know. Look, you had to play the games, I guess. You could have played it on a Tuesday. As for your question about the Browns coming there, I don't know what they do. But clearly Mother Nature has no concerns over the Bills' Week 12 and Week 13 schedule because, it just doesn't seem to like the NFL very much. And the NFL, I guess to their credit, finding ways to get this game played. But do you guys find it a little hokey that they're making this the beginning of a national doubleheader when it wouldn't have been otherwise? I mean, that's a little. I don't know why you guys feel, but that feels a little hokey.
It's not a national doubleheader because
it's not. Oh.
Yeah, they're having the regular ESPN game, and then they're gonna have the Bills-Jets game locally still because I live right by New York or around New York City, and they're still gonna have the local channels for upstate New York and stuff for Bills, and then for Jets around the tri-state area, and they're actually gonna allow people to watch it on DirecTV channel 706 for those of people that have it. So technically, it's not national, but it kind of is, I guess you would say. But it is interesting, and just one note before you guys weigh in on that. The game you were talking about, Adam, was Giants-Vikings was moved to Ford Field in 2010.
Giants-Vikings, that's what it was. My apologies, yeah.
It'd be interesting to see the number of fans that were at that game, actually.
I think it had a pretty good crowd. I remember seeing an article about that. But, okay, so Giants-Vikings, and so I'm wrong on that geographical point because New York City far away from Detroit. So
yeah, but it was supposed to be a away game anyway for the Giants. They were still going to travel.
Very true. And Minneapolis, like I said, is closer to Detroit than Buffalo is to Detroit. So
exactly.
Yeah. But it's interesting. And hey, couldn't the Bills? Jim Schwartz, by the way, his second game in Ford Field, not as a Lions head coach. He was there earlier when the Bills traveled to Detroit, the Bills defensive coordinator. He gets 2 games on the field that he used to be a coach. That used to be his home field when he was coach there. Isn't that kind of a disadvantage to the Jets? Even though I don't think they would have been good enough to win in Buffalo.
Yeah, so they're going to carry him off the field when they beat the Jets, right? I mean, that just has to happen. It's nuts too because the Bills are actually traveling on snowmobiles from their houses. I was seeing on Twitter earlier, and they're
Wow.
snowmobiles to their houses, or I mean, from their houses to like cars that are parked on the highway, taking those cars to the airport, then flying to Ford Field, and then practicing tonight at 7:15. At least that's the plan. I mean, that's how crazy this whole entire thing is.
Wow.
But I mean, this game and the whole entire situation is actually very interesting. I mean, I know the Bills just got bought out and they're not going to move because the Bills have a great fan base, but just in terms of like weather, like I mean, the NFL won't do this, but they've got to be thinking like maybe we should move the Bills game somewhere. I mean, we should move the Bills somewhere else and not have a franchise in Buffalo because things like this could happen a lot.
Yeah. I mean, the lake affects snow. I mean, like it's the same thing with hurricanes in Florida. It's like the weather's not going to stop just because we're here. So, I mean, that is a good point. And I mean, this is an area of the country that gets this a lot, just the lake effect and everything. And they either need to probably dome it, maybe move away from the lake, maybe do a city that's more inland. I don't know the geography of Western New York that well. I'm sure there's cities more in the interior of Western New York, close enough to Buffalo, that don't get the exact winds and colds from the lake that you could do it, or just do what you're supposed to do. Move this to Toronto, a big market that's within, that's within what, like 100, 200 miles of Buffalo, so Buffaloers can still get there and put it in a major city already. But that's just me. I'm probably unemotional on it because I live here in LA. Big bad Angelina who knows nothing about Western New York, but that's just my opinion.
Do they have a? Is that just me? Or don't they play? They play one game a year up in Toronto every year.
No, they canceled that this year.
They canceled this year.
Yeah, but yeah, otherwise that would have been an option. But they
Right.
don't have the rights, and I'm sure there's other, events going on like concerts and stuff. Before we get to before we get to everything else, just one quick note of breaking news that Jonas Gray, who had an incredible game last week against the Colts, 4 touchdowns, named AFC Offensive Player of the Week last week, he may not play this week because he is not injured, but because he overslept and was kicked out of practice, making that LeGarrette Blount signing, which we'll get to later, a little more important. Very interesting developments coming out of the New England area over the last, I'd say, 15 minutes. But let's get off the Bills-Jets, because that will be an interesting game for Monday. I don't know if it'll be quality, a good game, football-wise, but at least it's another football game, and I think a lot of people will go just because it's football and they get an extra game. So let's go to a little divisional, or actually, before we go divisional roundup, a lot of interesting stuff happening in Washington, D.C. this week with RG3. He had a pretty poor game against I want to say, I forget who it was, against...
Bucks.
What?
The Bucks.
Right. The Bucks had a bad game against them and took a lot of heat from Jay Gruden, the head coach there. Called him out in a press conference after RG3 said after the game that he needed the players to step up and all that noise. Then the next day, Jay Gruden called him out and told him to just worry about playing quarterback, and then quickly retracted from those statements by saying that he apologized to RG3 and didn't mean to make a distraction, which raises a couple questions. One, is RG3, would you want him as your quarterback, especially given how much they gave up for him in terms of draft picks? And two, it obviously shows that RG3 has more of a say in and more importance in Washington, D.C., and to the owner than the coach does, because this was clearly a Dan Schneider motivated move to tell Jay Gruden to get off RG3 and apologize and retract from his statements. I mean, this is just a mess down there. Do you think they'd hit the reset button? I mean, what do you guys think about that question? Michael, I'll throw to you here.
Well, I think at this point they're too invested to hit the reset button right now. I think they'll go at least another season and hope that something could turn around. To answer your question about is he worth it, I personally wouldn't want him as my quarterback. I mean, you see the potential, he's smart, he's athletic, all the tools are there, but at the same time, injury concerns, attitude concerns. It's just too many headaches for a franchise. And I personally think Gruden was actually in the right to call him out, and that was one of the few things that went right for the Redskins that week, but he stepped back because I think RG3 just has too much of a stronghold on that team right now, and there's not a lot of room for other voices.
I mean, I completely agree with Michael. I think you can't really hit the reset button right now, but I think in their ideal world, I think they wanted to. I think when RG3 went down, I think that's when they thought this is a perfect opportunity. We're going to throw Kirk Cousins in there. He's going to be playing so well. We're going to win every single game. And then, then what are we supposed to do? And then you have a built-in excuse like, well, we can't bring RG3 back. You know, we've won 4 games in a row without him, and we have a guy throwing 300 yards every game. Obviously, that didn't happen, and they had to bench Kirk Cousins for Colt McCoy. So now they're kind of in a pickle. They have nothing. They got to play RG3, and they, like we've all said, like Michael, you just touched on, they have so much invested in them. So they're kind of stuck, and, you know, they're going to go with them, obviously, throughout this year, and, you know, they're going to go with them. I mean, in my mind, they're going to go with them to start next year. I wouldn't want him as my quarterback personally, and to be honest, he hasn't been the same since he got hurt in that playoff game a couple of years back. So I'm not sure if he's playing injured or he's digressed, but when you watch him play, he doesn't show the threat of a running quarterback anymore. He stands in the pocket mostly, so if he's going to stand in the pocket, he's not that big of a threat. He has to give out the illusion that he's going to run the ball, and that's his main game. Same thing with like Colin Kaepernick. Same thing. If they don't run the ball, Russell Wilson, same thing. They're not the best pocket passers. They're not Tom Brady. They're not Andrew Luck. So they can't just stand back there and make those incredible throws. Their whole game is getting people off balance, running the zone, read option and stuff. So Redskins, I mean, that franchise is always a mess. They're like the Raiders a little bit in their own right, just complete mess with ownership and quarterbacks and this and that. So I don't really see it improving there much. But I do think next year, you know, they're not going to have an option. They're going to go with RG3. He's healthy. He's great, and hope again. But next year might be the last year. They might need to do something else.
Zach, you mentioned Kirk Cousins. I think that's probably why, as you and Mike both said, they don't hit the reset button, which is because who do you have behind Robert? You have Kirk Cousins, who looked okay for a few games and then turned into a turnover machine, and you definitely can't go with him. Colt McCoy is maybe even slighter than RG3 and injury prone and concussion histories, and he's not going to be, you know, your pocket passing extraordinaire that's going to win you NFC East titles. I mean, I think that this Skins team, and you hit it on the head, Zach. This Skins team, since Snyder bought them, has been a mess, and even worse, they've been a nationally irrelevant mess, which is something that brand is a pretty big brand. So for them to be nationally relevant and a mess is very Raiders-like, you know, a fall from grace for a once proud team. And Robert, like, they need to they should have probably kept him on the bench. Look, this was going to be a lost season anyways. I mean, I don't really think anybody had illusions that the Skins were that good, even though the NFC East coming in was weak and is a little better than we thought, but we still didn't think of it to be this good division. We still kind of all, for the most part, predicted, Washington, how good are they really going to be? So in that vein, maybe you keep Robert sitting, you get him even healthier, and you start working on his passing game. You know, make him a pocket passer. You have already invested this much in him, already given all these draft picks up. Why not try to make him a pocket passer? To keep him as he is and continue to watch the years go by, him get slower, and that trade up look more and more like it killed your franchise for no reason. Why don't they hit the reset button in terms of just making him a pocket passer and turn him from a track star into that? I mean, what do you guys think about that? Like, don't you think they could make him a pocket passer? Like, Mike, don't you think they could make him a pocket passer and hit the reset just in terms of changing his game up? There's no reason to keep him as a running quarterback. He's going to keep getting killed, and you're going to keep looking at him as a wasted investment.
I think there's a middle ground there. I mean, part of why they took RG3 is because he was supposed to be like a human video game, and you want that running element with the passing element. But I mean, take for example Colin Kaepernick. The 49ers keep him healthy, keep him protected by working a system around him that plays to his strengths. And I think the Redskins have to do a better job of that. I think he could be fine in the right situation. You just got to keep him healthy and also keep him under control in terms of what he says to the media.
Yeah, what he's I think Robert's big problem, and Zach, Andrew, you guys can chime in if you agree with this, but I think another one of Zach's big problems that Mike alluded to is he needs to kind of stay out of the media a little bit. His situation feels a lot like the Derrick Rose situation with the Bulls, where it's like these guys were like the prodigal sons, and now they're injury prone, and now they can't stay out of the media and keep their foots out of their mouths and saying dumb things, and their fan bases have turned against them. And Robert, you got to stop being a brand and start actually being good, and then the branding comes later. I'm all for athletes wanting to get a little shine off the field or off the court or off the ice or whatever they play, but you got to have the production first, and I think he's worried more about RG3, the brand, than the player. You guys have thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, just to keep it real short, I absolutely agree. I think he just needs to shut up and play, and you got to go out and produce and do something before you can start complaining and talking about your teammates and this and that. And yeah, I mean, keep it short. He needs to not talk. He needs to just go out there and produce. And if he wants to say something in the locker room and be a leader, then go for it. And he needs to talk to Deshaun Jackson, take him to the side, then go for it. But he needs to not go through the media and start blaming people, his teammates, coaches, this, that, because ultimately it's on him, and he's the quarterback, and he should know that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Redskins is kind of exactly what happened with their division rival and historical rival in the Redskins, is this problem starts at the owners, in the owner's box. I mean, Jerry Jones was always sticking his hand in the Cowboys' business and the coaching staff and causing problems until recently. And then he kind of did it again with Tony Romo, and they went on a little kind of, I guess, streak media-wise in terms of losing, and also they lost a couple of games. But, I mean, Dan Snyder just needs to stop doing everything. This is kind of what exactly RG3 needed in terms of Jay Gruden calling him out and just telling him to shut up and play, like all you guys have mentioned. And to have Jay Gruden then come back the next day and apologize for it, it's clearly showing that RG3 is more important to this franchise. And how is Jay Gruden going to go into the locker room and tell the other 52 players that they need to follow him and to do something? Because he kind of looks like a lame duck coach, because he knows if he says something wrong about RG3, Dan Snyder is just going to come down and say something, and then he'll have to retract from those statements. He can't be a real coach and hold this guy to a high standard that he should be held to. Because he was Rookie of the Year, and he looked great. And then the last 2 years, granted some of it was injuries and coming back from it, but he really hasn't progressed as a pocket passer. His athleticism is a little compromised because of the ACL injury and then coming back from it last year, and then the ankle injury that kept him out for 4 or 5 weeks. So it really is just a mess there. But since we talked about the Redskins and they played the Bucs last week, let's look forward to the Bucs this week and start with you, Adam, and Zach, because the Week 12 slate features the Bucs against the Bears. And, of course, the big storyline there is that Lovie Smith and Josh McCown, who now play for the Buccaneers, were both with the Bears, and they returned to play in Chicago. And, I mean, what are the storylines there? Mike, you go first, and then they'll kind of dive deep into it. I mean, it makes an interesting case, even though both teams kind of stink. Bears at 4-6, Buccaneers at 2-8.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on it a little bit. Lovie Smith returns to Chicago along with Josh McCown. Bears fans were obviously very fond of Lovie Smith. Adam could probably touch on that a little bit more. And Josh McCown and Jay Cutler teamed up to combine for the most yards in Bears history last season. So big storylines there. And just from a Bucs perspective, you're coming in you just have 2 wins on the season, but honestly, they looked like the best team in the NFC South with how they played last week. And you have the defense finally playing buck ball, the type of football that Lovie Smith always promised, with 6 sacks, forcing turnovers last week. It'll be interesting to see how they perform against a very dangerous Bears offense with Alshon Jeffrey, Brandon Marshall, and Matt Forte.
Yeah, you know, I can say that the Chicago media really, it was surprising. Like, even a couple weeks back, the Chicago media and the fans were kind of always circling this game. The defensive players for the Bears especially, and a lot of the fans who liked Lovie's, the way that the Bears were always among the leaders in turnovers, and that even if the Bears weren't always winning Super Bowls, they were at least consistent, 7 wins, get a couple of playoff appearances, yada yada. Lovie, he built some equity there in Chicago. They really liked him. A lot of the players liked his honesty. He was honestly someone that they actually missed. Even some of the fans missed, and the media missed when he got fired. And him and Josh McCown's return has been kind of a storyline in a game that otherwise probably Bears fans would have not paid attention to. But that's what makes it very interesting. It also makes it very interesting because, as these teams are actually not necessarily out of it in the playoff race. Even the Bears. I did a list gallery for Fox. We do these picture list galleries, and one of them was on the Bears and how the season's not quite over for them. They can still actually win the division. If Green Bay goes on a little bit of a slide here and the Bears win out, Bears can still win that division despite being swept by the Packers. The Bears have 3 divisional games left. The division-leading Lions have 4 left, including two Detroit versus Chicago games. So the Bears could actually gain on Detroit not once but twice. And the Bears have a pretty easy schedule down the stretch. The only teams they have that are even top offenses are Dallas and New Orleans, which is good for their bad defense. And you know what, the Bucs, you look at the Bucs, and you can attest to this, Mike. The Bucs, even though they're 2-8, they're still in the NFC South race because the NFC South is so bad. And they've actually, outside of that Week 3 blowout to Atlanta and Week I think 4 or 5 blowout to the Ravens, whatever week the Ravens blowout was, I was looking it up, and then you would know this as well. The Bucs have actually been in quite a few of the games that they've lost in. They lost one in overtime on a fumble return for a touchdown. They barely lost one to the Rams. They could actually have 6 wins right now. It's entirely feasible. They haven't been as terrible as they were in that Week 3 game, and both these teams don't have very good defenses. This could actually be a very interesting game, despite it being 2-8 at 4-6.
Yeah, exactly. And, amazingly, at 2-8, the Bucs are simultaneously 2 games out of the division lead and in position to get a top 3 draft pick this season. So, go figure. But, honestly, with how they played yesterday, if we were starting from scratch, I wouldn't really blame anybody who wanted to jump back on the bandwagon saying that they're a trendy pick to win the NFC South. I think that if they have the defense clicking, they could really have a legitimate run and maybe win more games than any other team remaining in the NFC South. And, it's kind of funny with how they're playing defense now. Maybe the Bears are kind of wishing that they had that back in Chicago again.
Yeah, and, I think that the way that the Bucs defense has gotten better is something that Bears fans wish they had. But like I said, the Bears play a lot of bad offenses down the stretch. They still have a chance to get to the playoffs, including the fact that they have a tiebreaker over San Francisco, should it come to that after beating them in Week 2. And so Zach and Andrew, these Bucs and Bears teams, believe it or not, this could actually be a something that has important playoff implications, which is pretty ridiculous considering that it's Week 12 and they're both under 500, but it's possible.
It is possible. You guys are talking, I never even thought of any of those scenarios. I've never even thought of any of those scenarios with those two teams. To me, it's just I do think the Bucks are better than a 2-8 record, like both you guys said.
They are, yeah.
And I agree with that. But as far as the Bears, the Bears did win last week, but just with the way the Packers are playing, I just don't see them blowing any division. Like, I think the Packers are potentially, them and New England are probably playing the best football of anybody right now in the NFL.
Oh, well, Zach, I wasn't – well, beating the Packers out for the division is a tougher task, but they could still challenge the Lions for second in the division and could still get a wild card, because if they take care of the Lions twice and Minnesota one more time, which they can do because Jay Cutler is 8-3, including this year against Minnesota, and they beat the Bucks and stuff like that, and they maybe split between New Orleans and Dallas. Let's say it comes down to them in San Francisco. They have that tiebreaker. I think more so, like, this game, they might be looking more so at wild card possibilities, because I think the Packers, having the 2-game edge on them by sweeping them, and I think the Packers only have 2 divisional games left, including this week. I think the Bears are more looking at trying to maybe finish in second and get a wild card berth, which is still possible. But the division is out there for the taking if need be. But I agree with you. I don't think the Packers are going to slip.
Yeah,
I don't think the Lions are going to slip either.
I do think, and I've said this every week, that I do think the Lions are overrated. And I keep saying that. And then last week I picked them because they keep winning and then they lost. So I don't really know how my picks go. But I do think from watching the Lions that they're overrated. They can't score. And just, they can't put any points on the board. They get 14, 15 points a game. Last week, they have 6 points. So it's just not going to do it. They have Stafford, who, has not turned the ball over, but he's not throwing it downfield. I don't know if Megatron's completely healthy. Tate is playing great, but for some reason they're having trouble getting in the end zone. So I do think we could see a fall apart from the Lions. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I know they got the Patriots in a huge game on the road, and I just don't see any way they win that game. And then obviously, they play on Thanksgiving, like they always do. Who do they have on Thanksgiving?
The Bears come to Detroit on Thanksgiving.
Right, so I think you've hit that nail on the head that the Bears can go to Detroit and win that game. You're looking at Bears can win 2 in a row, be 6-6, and the Lions would be 7-5 with 2 losses, assuming they lose to New England this weekend.
Right,
right there.
Zach. Yeah, not only that, but don't forget the Lions. If that scenario happened, the Lions would also have to go to Chicago, the second to last week of the season too. So I don't know if Detroit's overrated. We'll talk more about Detroit when we cover them with the Patriots, but I do think that defense might be for real. And if they can keep the Patriots close, even if they lose, then I think the Bears are done, because the Bears have not been good against good defensive teams, and the Lions are the only team that's ranked high up defensively that they face. So we'll see, but it's all out there for the Bears and even for the Bucks, as we discussed.
Yeah, just looking at the schedules real quick, the Lions have the Patriots this week, of course, then the 2 Bears games, like you said, the Buccaneers, which could or could not be a win. I would assume it's a win just because of the Buccaneers' record. Then the Vikings on December 14th, at Bears, and then at the Packers to close the season, which could or could not be for the division, depending on what happens before. And then the Packers have the Vikings, the Patriots, the Falcons, the Bills, the Bucks, and then the Lions. So you have winnable games on both sides there, and it'll be interesting to see. I do agree with Zach's point, though, because that Lions offense has really struggled despite the fact that they do have the best receiver in football, or what many people consider to be the best receiver in football, in Calvin. Golden Tate's a very good number 2, but the running game is very poor. Stafford still makes some bad throws that he shouldn't, but they are pulling out wins that they normally don't. Adam, finish up your division kind of preview with the Packers, and we'll hit the Lions and Patriots after. Okay.
Just to finish up the division, I'll talk about the 2 teams that aren't in marquee games, which Bears-Bucks, I guess, isn't marquee, but it is for our podcast. So the non-marquee NFC North game is Packers at Vikings to finish it off. The Packers beat the Vikings earlier in the season, 42-10 in Lambeau Field. this game I think is going to be an easy win for the Packers. The Vikings can't score. The Vikings have a very good defense, so they could keep it close, but they can't score. I think the Packers are going to win. The Vikings also have a lot of distractions with Adrian Peterson. As most people know, Adrian Peterson's suspension was upheld by the league despite the appeal, so he's not going to play for the rest of the year, and now there's all kinds of questions about whether the Vikings will drop him or not. So they have those distractions dealing with Adrian Peterson. They still got a young quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. The Packers should win this game pretty easily, and that's all I kind of want to say about that, because I don't think that's the greatest game, but it is my division, so there you go.
Right.
And then Lions-Patriots will be interesting. We were discussing a little bit about the Lions and how on offense they've really struggled, which they have. They've had a lot of tight end injuries and health issues. Calvin Johnson's been hurt a lot this year. The running game has been inconsistent, but Matt Stafford hasn't made necessarily as many huge mistakes as he has in the past. That defense has been keeping them in games and allowing them to win games. And like I said, if the Lions go into Foxborough and the Patriots win, 17-6, then am I really going to slam the Lions? What if the Lions hold the Patriots to 15 points and still lose? Like, all of a sudden you're looking at that Lions defense as the real deal. They've already held Green Bay to their season lows in most categories. Green Bay only scored 7 points against the Lions. We've seen how good that offense has been since then. So this Lions defense actually might be the real deal. And if that's the case, then I don't know if I like the Bears down the stretch. And maybe they could even go into Green Bay and win, because this defense has certainly been physical and certainly been surprising and certainly kept teams like New Orleans and Green Bay, teams they played earlier, and even Atlanta, which statistically are good offenses, to some of their worst offensive outputs of the year.
And then I guess just switching over to the NFC South preview right now. We already talked about the Bucs and Bears, but we have the division-leading 4-6 Falcons going up against the Cleveland Browns. All 4 of those wins for the Falcons have come within the NFC South. So, if possible, you could say it's a weak 4-6. They'll have to prove some things against somebody outside of the NFC South this week. And the Browns are going to be bringing back Josh Gordon from his 10-game suspension. The word is that Desmond Trufant will likely be shadowing him, but we'll see how long that lasts if Gordon's on a snap count. But overall, I mean, Mike Smith, who was pretty much on a plane out of Atlanta, is now gaining some momentum. He has this new 1-0 mentality that the players seem to be buying into, where each week they start with a clean slate and they just try to win one game at a time. We'll see how they deal with a couple injuries. They lost Anton Smith for the season to a broken leg, and they'll be playing with Robert Alford. But they have Robert McClain stepping in, and hopefully he'll be able to pick up the slack. Mercifully, the Panthers are on a bye this week. Cam Newton will use that time to figure out a new Twitter password and hopefully also improve his play, because it's been pretty brutal as of late. The team also released Jason Avant for some behavioral issues, so they'll have to make adjustments for that. Lastly, on Monday night, we have the Saints going against the Ravens. Drew Brees will try to become just the 3rd player in NFL history to defeat all 32 NFL franchises if he could beat the Ravens. The Saints are coming in reeling. They have 2 straight losses, one of them tough, one of them embarrassing. And now they'll have to deal with losing Raphael Bush and Brandon Cooks, 2 key starters. So it remains to be seen how they'll replace them. But this is getting close to the must-win territory, even though they're basically tied with the Falcons for first place. They start needing to get their identity back and start winning some games in order to make a run at the NFC South.
I'll jump on the AFC South real quick. We have an AFC South matchup, which most people will probably not be watching unless it goes into the red zone. Colts, Jaguars. I mean, Colts coming off a tough game. Jaguars are the Jaguars. I predict a huge blowout in this game. I think the Colts are going to destroy them. I think the only interesting thing about this game is the Colts, this is their third game in a row. They're facing a team coming off a bye, which people in Indianapolis aren't exactly thrilled about. Seems a little quirky on the scheduling, but I think they'll be okay facing the Jaguars. So I think they'll get by just fine. They're 14-point favorites, and I would expect them to win by at least that much. I think Luck will have a big game. They did lose Bradshaw, obviously, last week, but I think against the Jaguars, they'll figure it out, and Trent Richardson can handle it just fine. As far as the Titans,
he does average about 1 yard a carry.
Yeah, well, it could probably go up to 3 against the Jags, so I think they'll be fine. Worst case scenario, they can have Luck throw the ball.
Yeah.
They'll be fine. Don't worry about the Colts versus the Jaguars. Titans, Eagles. Titans on the road against Philadelphia. You know, Mettenberger has shown some signs that he could be the quarterback for them. He played pretty well last Monday night against the Steelers. So it could be, they could keep it close, and, you know, it is Mark Sanchez, so maybe. But I think all said and done, the Eagles will take the game. Just got too many weapons, and they just have more talent overall than the Titans. Titans are kind of getting there if Mettenberg can be the guy. But I just don't think they can hang with Philadelphia, especially in Philadelphia. That's going to be a tough one.
Are they encouraged by Mettenberger down in Tennessee? Like, I know it's only a couple games, but are they at least saying, like, wow, this guy could be the quarterback, like, of the future, or something we at least say, like, all right, we're not going to waste the first-round pick on a quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I think before this last game, before the Monday night game, it was all very up in the air with Mettenberger, and it was like, oh, okay, like, we might have to use a first-round pick, like we talked about the Jameis Winston thing, suck for the duck, Mariota, something like that. But I think they were very encouraging. Like, if you watch that game, he can get the ball downfield. And that 80-yard pass, he made a great play to Washington. So he's got an arm. He's not very mobile. Obviously, he's a strong guy. Lots of people like to compare him actually to Roethlisberger. So he's not gonna run the ball, but he is strong. He's big. He can get the ball downfield. So it's not all super, glum and glim and dim in Tennessee, but it's not great, and this game is going to be tough for them. I don't think anybody expects them to win this game, but I think they would like to see them continue to be competitive and continue to at least put points up on the board and, make it a high-scoring game against the Eagles. And then the last game in the AFC South is Texans-Bengals, and this is an interesting game. Obviously, huge playoff implications. Obviously, with the Bengals, AFC North aren't my division, but watching them, you have no idea what you're going to get with the Bengals. It's an afternoon game, so I guess that helps Andy Dalton, that he's not have to perform underneath the lights. But, I mean, I have no idea what you get with the Bengals. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're awful. It's hard to predict. I will say this, the Texans are, and maybe it's just because I cover them, but I feel like they're the most talked about 5-5 team. And granted, they have the best player in the NFL, at least the best defender in the NFL. And there's everything out there right now is, can you win the MVP? J.J. Watt, obviously. Can he win the MVP of the whole league offensively as well? And, with the way he's playing, he just might be able to. He was Defensive Player of the Week last week. So if the Texans can go in and win this game, they're looking like, okay, at the playoffs, 6-5. And I think same thing with them. They're pretty high on Ryan Mallett. I think they're glad that they have finally benched Fitzpatrick. It's interesting because they always talk Fitzpatrick is just a smart quarterback, went to Harvard, never makes mistakes, yet he was constantly making mistakes and constantly making dumb plays. So it's like, I can't just be like he went to Harvard and he's the world's smartest guy. He might be the world's smartest book smart guy, but Mallett's been making the better throws last week, and honestly, just play much smarter than him. So I think the Texans are going into this game with a lot of confidence against the Bengals, especially at home, and they know it's a must-win. At this point, the Texans probably have to win out at 5-5 to get to the playoffs. Maybe they can lose one more. And they have a schedule that can get them there, too. So I think if Malik continues playing the way he does, they have weapons, obviously, in Andre Johnson. They have the best player in the league, J.J. Watt, just absolutely dominating people. I think they got a chance. They still get the Jaguars twice, the Texans. They get the Titans. They have the Colts on the road. It's going to be a tough one. And then they get the Ravens at home. So I see no reason why they can't win 5 out of the last 6 games.
Zach, I got one quick question for you before Andrew Finn wraps up the AFC East and we talk about some of the bigger games that don't involve our division. But real quickly, before we leave the AFC South, we talked about Tennessee and Houston's feelings about their quarterback. We know about Indy's. Real quick, how does Jacksonville feel about Blake Bortles at this point?
You know, it's a good question. They're very – I think the people in Jacksonville, the people that are still watching them anyways, they know that they're kind of stuck with Bortles. He was the 3rd pick of the draft. They're not going to go in a whole new direction. So they're kind of just giving him his shot. He turns the ball over way too much, and he knows that, and they all need to know he needs to cut down on it. So I think, you know, they're willing to ride with them, and they're willing to go the end of this year, whether they end up 1-15 or 2-14, and give him the shot next year. But I think next year is more when the pressure will come on. I will say this about Bortles. He dumped his famous girlfriend, Lindsay Duke, who got all the press around the draft about, you know, the hot blonde model. So people are kind of happy with that. They're like, oh, it's less of a distraction. So maybe that could help them. Who knows? Can't hurt. But that's been one of the big news around Jacksonville recently. So it is what it is with Bortles. They know he's going to make mistakes, and I think they're more forgiving this year. But next year it could get a little harsher. You know, if they continue. I think they're tired of being 1-9 every year.
Right, of course.
Lindsay Duke, she is kind of good looking, just a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take over here. AFC East, you covered the Bills and Jets. There's not much there. Bills just trying to maybe get back in the playoff race. The Jets, I don't know what to say anymore. They're just the Jets. But the only other game before me and Adam kind of battle it out over Lions and Pats is the Dolphins visit the Broncos. On paper, this looks like a really good game. In our minds, everyone kind of sees that Denver and this high-powered offense are going to just blow away the Dolphins, especially because the Dolphins are traveling to Denver, which is a tough matchup for any team, regardless of where they're coming from. They're going to the cold, which is out of Miami's element. And granted, Miami has a good defense. They got very good talent all across the board on defense, especially Cameron Wake on the defensive line. They've been generating a lot of pressure. But that's kind of the biggest question, the defense versus Peyton Manning. What is going to happen there? And especially if Julius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are back and ready to play, that's a lot of weapons for Miami to play against. And, you know, they struggled against a Jacksonville team and were helped out by Blake Bortles, like you had said, throwing 2 interceptions and 2 pick sixes. So you can imagine what's going to happen when they're not facing Blake Bortles and Kyle Orton in back-to-back weeks and Geno Smith, and they actually face a very good quarterback, arguably the best quarterback in the league, unless you want to say it's Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. But that's kind of the biggest thing for the Dolphins is can they defend Peyton Manning? And then on the flip side for the offense is Ryan Tannehill is progressing very well since he's been called out by Joe Philbin for the London game. And can they get the big play, though? That is the biggest thing, actually, is that they've struggled once again to get the big play, to hit Mike Wallace on a huge play. They've gotten these short touchdowns to Mike Wallace, but they haven't been able to get that 60-yard touchdown or that 80-yard strike all the way down the field. So that's kind of the biggest thing for them. Now looking at the rest of the games here, there's really only 2 games that we haven't kind of talked about in the NFL schedule. The first game that I want to get to is the Seahawks and Cardinals because I think that's going to be a really good game. Cardinals are visiting the Seahawks. Cardinals come into Seattle with Drew Stanton at quarterback, of course, and they'll have him for the rest of the season, as Carson Palmer tore his ACL. The Seahawks, though, are struggling. I mean, they lost last week to Kansas City, and Kansas City just lost to Oakland, which Riddle me that, because I can't explain that. And, you know, if the Seahawks lose this game, they might not make the playoffs. And I know Super Bowl teams have a history of not making the playoffs or not getting out of the divisional round. This is going to be a crazy game. I mean, the Cardinals, I think if the Cardinals win in Seattle, either everyone is going to really believe that the Cardinals are for real because there's still a little insecurity about whether Drew Stanton can lead a team. But if they go into Seattle and win, then, you know, I think people are going to really believe in them. But they may also go to the other side and say, hey, the Seahawks are not that good this year, and it's really not an impressive win. So, I mean, Mike, what do you think about this game? Is it like if the Cardinals win, is it more about the Cardinals being good or the Seahawks being bad?
I mean, personally, I think if you can go into Seattle and win the game, I don't care how they're playing, to go into that stadium and win a game, that's impressive. And I'm not sure I've been completely on the Cardinals this year. Like, I'm not sure I've been a true believer, even though they're 9-1. So I do think this. I mean, for me personally, I think it would definitely put me over the edge of being like, okay, they're the real deal. As far as the game, though, it's a much bigger game for the Seahawks. The Cardinals can afford to lose on the road, 9-2. Seahawks go 6-5 and lose at home and still have 2 games left against the Niners. I mean, I think you said it exactly, Andrew. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. So it's a must-win for Seattle, and it's a game for the Cardinals where they can really, you know, show people they're the real deal and, you know, they're Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, well, touching on the Cardinals, I would say, first of all, I think the situation reminds me a lot of when the Niners and the Seahawks rose to prominence. Actually, you had these teams that were previously pretty mediocre, and then they came out of nowhere with dominating defense and solid offense, and people kept questioning it until they were in the playoffs and, you know, advancing to NFC championships in the Super Bowl. With that said, I think in a must-win game at home in Seattle, if the Seahawks can't win this one, then it's looking pretty iffy for the playoffs. I think this is pretty much a make-or-break game for them.
Yeah, this is a make-or-break game. Really tough. You mentioned it, Zach. 2 games against San Francisco. They'd have another game against Arizona. Are they done with the Rams, by the way? Does anyone know? Either way.
Yeah, I mean, we could look that up real quick.
But they'd have 2 against the Niners, 1 more against Arizona. Whether or not they have another game against the Rams or not.
They do. They have it at the end of the season. It goes Cardinals, 49ers, Eagles, 49ers, Cardinals, Rams. So
yeah,
that's a very tough schedule.
That's a really tough schedule. Their only out-of-division game is the Eagles, who are good. And we all know that the Rams might be the best last-place team in the NFL. I mean, the Rams, I know they're 4-6, but that Rams team, both last year and this year, has blown out teams the likes of Indy, New Orleans, Denver. I mean, that team is pretty good for a last-place team. So Seattle has no gimmies, and they need to exert their dominance at home. I think they'll do it. Arizona won in Seattle last year with Carson Palmer. I still think that Drew Stanton and this Cardinals team can get 11 or 12 wins, maybe win a round in the playoffs. I just think that Seattle is going to come out fierce at home. And like San Francisco, I think Seattle and San Francisco are just going to try to hold water and maybe both try to grab some wild card spots, which would be, you know, pretty amazing. I mean, we've all known the NFC West is a really good division, but if they can have 2-3 teams from that division, then, you know, it'll confirm what we all kind of know. And I mean, I just don't think Seattle is going to allow themselves to lose at home. I'm not saying they'll win the division or Arizona is done, but I just think that this week Arizona won't beat Seattle. But I do think it'll be close because Arizona can put a lot of pressure on good passing offenses with their good corner play. Seattle is a terrible passing offense, and Arizona is like one of the best rushing teams in the league. They haven't allowed a rushing touchdown their last 20 opponents. So Seattle better get ready to kick a lot of field goals. And they could still win with a lot of field goals because Arizona's not the best offense. So I think this will be a slugfest that Seattle will barely win.
Yeah, I mean, they did, like you had mentioned, they did win the Cardinals. I'm talking about. They did win last year despite Carson Palmer throwing 4 interceptions, but that defense was also a lot better because they had Darnell Dockett, they had Darrell Washington in the lineup. Darrell Washington suspended for the year, and Darnell Dockett tore his ACL. So that will definitely be an interesting game. I hope it's a very good game because it looks like it, but it'll tell a lot about where not only the NFC West could go, but who will have the number 1 seed as well. And let's go to the Lions and Patriots here. I guess before me and Adam kind of delve into it deep, I mean, what are your initial reactions, Mike and Zach, here on this game?
Sorry, to the Patriots game?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to go anything against the Patriots at this point. They're just absolutely dominating. Tom Brady seems to be on a different level. I personally think he's MVP of the league. And while the Lions' defense has been impressive, which I totally agree with, I just don't see them stopping Tom Brady. And I think even an off day or great defense from the Lions, what's the worst case scenario the Patriots put up? They put up 24 points. I think that would be the lowest they could possibly put up with the way their offense is playing. Whether Jonas Gray plays or not, they have whoever you plug into that system with Brady and Belichick, it always seems to work out. So, I'm looking at a big Patriots win here. I just don't see the Lions putting up enough points and be able to stop Brady and the Patriots.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Patriots are on too big a roll right now to be stopped. I would look for a big game from the passing game. I think Westphal and Gronkowski will both have big games, and ultimately, the Patriots defense will do enough against Detroit's offense to keep them at bay and pull out the win.
Well, we've discussed this game before. This is a big test for the Lions defense, and a big test for the Lions in general. I actually think the Lions can do it because I've looked at what the Lions have done against some of the other offenses they faced, and they faced them statistically. I know Atlanta's disappointing. I know New Orleans is disappointing. But statistically, those are good offenses. Green Bay is not only a good statistical offense, but they've been very impressive. The Lions have held them all down. So I said it earlier that I think that even if the Lions lose 15-9, if they hold New England to 15 points at home and Gronk has no touchdowns, then the Lions defense is for real, and that would be a good thing going forward because with a defense that good, you can certainly win games even if your offense struggles. Here are the keys to the game for me, though, really quick, just to push through here. The Lions need to make sure that the Patriots don't get out to a fast start on offense because this Lions offense has not been good enough to catch up to big leads. So if the Patriots get out to a 21-0 lead and that's all the Lions defense allows, that might still be bad because Tom Brady and that offense can do ball control and keep the ball away from the Lions for the rest of the game and just end it there. I think the Lions offense also needs to start fast. I think Calvin Johnson needs to take advantage of the double teams he gets, and Golden Tate needs to try to burn Darrelle Revis because they've usually been lining Darrelle Revis up with the second receiver while the first primary receiver gets double teamed. So offense and defense need to start fast. If that happens, then the Lions have a chance. And even if the defense doesn't do well, if the Lions can find their groove offensively and make this a shootout, in years past in the Jim Schwartz era, the Lions have been able to win shootout games. So I think the Lions finding their offense is probably the most important. Second would be the defense can't let the Patriots start fast. They have to make it a really ugly, muckety-muck kind of game for 4 quarters in order to pull out a win here.
Yeah, for the Patriots side of things, I think there's 2 keys. One is how they can defend Calvin Johnson. He's finally healthy. I I don't know if they're gonna kind of put Darrelle Revis into that Revis Island role where he follows Calvin Johnson all over the field and blankets him, or if he only plays one side of the field. If Calvin Johnson goes to that side, great. If not, they have Brandon Browner on the other side, and they put a safety over the top to double him and really force them to go to Golden Tate, and then they have Golden Tate versus Darrelle Revis, which is also probably an advantage for the Patriots. And my other thing is that the Patriots' offensive line, which has had some trouble protecting Brady, not recently, but towards the beginning, especially against the Chiefs of the year, is going against that dominant defensive line in Detroit. Dominican Sue, Ziggy Ansah, is Kyle Vanden Bosch still there?
No.
Who's there? Is it what's his name, Jones?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Jones is there, and then they also have Nick Fairley on the defensive line. So
who's hurt, but his fill-in, whose name I'm blanking on, has been good. That D-line in general has just been very, very good.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you look over the since they've won, Bengals, Bills, Jets, Bears, Broncos, Colts. The Bills have a really good defensive line, and the Patriots wipe the floor with them. The Jets do too, and they only beat them by 2. Bears don't. Broncos do, but they weren't too effective. I'd love to see how they protect Tom Brady on Sunday against the Lions. I think those are the 2 big keys. And then obviously Jonas Gray being out. I mean, how does LeGarrette Blount figure in? Do they use Shane Vereen a lot? How many snaps does LeGarrette Blount get? All that is very interesting in terms of the storyline. Adam, you have anything to add to that game?
No, I mean, just to say that you're absolutely right. They've got to get after Brady. If they can get after Brady and make him, run around, then this game is up for grabs for sure. But if they can't get to Brady, and guys like Hedebo and all these secondary guys who've been doing a good job have a lot of pressure on them because Tom Brady is all day in the pocket, then yeah, it's going to be a long day for Detroit.
Yeah, and especially if you can't throw to Gronk, that'll be a problem.
Right.
So that's it for us. I mean, I think we covered basically everything like we normally do. So, Mike, I hope it was a good first show for you. Coming on the Extra Point podcast here, we've kind of added 2 people, which has been awesome. A little more perspective, a little more talking besides me and Adam as recent ever before.
Right, and we get our Jaguars talk and our Bucks talk here first.
Yeah, I know. I mean, everyone needs that. All right. So good job, boys. We'll come back next week, probably around the same time, 2:30 Friday. You can tweet at us at AGBeer12 for me, at Blue Collar Guy for Adam, at Zachary Benau for Zach, and then you could like Michael Green on his LinkedIn page or Adam as a connection. I'm sure he'll like that as something fun that he can brag about on the next podcast. You should actually, how we can brag about followers? You should brag about how many connections you have next podcast.
Oh, I will.
All right, boys. Have a good weekend, and I hope everybody enjoyed the show. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.